When the woman was on the plane, she suddenly felt a bump. And in the next second, a fighter suddenly came up from a standstill. And in the blink of an eye, the passengers in the front row were all covered by the airflow coefficient cabin. Outside, the woman was also flying around in an instant because she was not wearing a seatbelt. And Nan had a desperate attempt to pull her back. But the huge inertia still made him unable to fly with him. He watched his boyfriend disappear in front of his eyes, and the woman suddenly felt a wave of despair in her heart. And the lyrics were where he was. The airport is also falling rapidly, and finally helplessly fumbled around, trying to grab something that could fix the body. But he couldn't earn it at all due to the strong airflow. Kai could only keep rolling around in the cabin. But perhaps there was providence in the dark, and the woman was preparing the screen to wait for her to die. But the clouds of the lunar calendar happened to be overturned. After a week, the woman was lucky enough to fall into a seat. He didn't have time to fasten his seatbelt, and the reporter became stronger, silently waiting for fate. In the end, the judgment was a violent roll, and after a violent roll, the wreckage of the plane finally fell into a dense forest. And it was under the buffer of these towering trees that the extremely lucky Lisa Giant Ape miraculously, looking at the dilapidated airport around her, Hi Lisa only thought she was dreaming for a while. But she was concentrating on the pain in her calf. Or let Lisa. Instantly woke up, it turned out that at the moment when the grassroots landed just now, an iron nail flew from now, and it was actually impartial, and it just hit Lisa's leg. The veil of people's wounds knew that she had to deal with it quickly. Although the severe pain made her almost unconscious, she could think of her boyfriend, whose life and death were uncertain, and her strength was still puffed up. With unprecedented courage, he screamed and pulled out all the iron nails. And then he tore his skirt again, carefully bandaged the wound with a strip of cloth, and finally relieved it a little. The pain caused by the leg soup. After all this, Lisa struggled to get up from her seat, and he kept shouting for help around him, hoping to meet others who survived. But no matter how good Lisa was, there was never any response from the surroundings, and the shouts of the bodies of the victims on his side were killed, slowly turning into pulling her up. Wang collapsed helplessly on the seat and soon fainted again under the double blow of body and mind, and fainted again. He raised his head and listened carefully for a while, and found that the sound seemed to be the roar of a helicopter, and Lisa came instantly. Spirit, he hurriedly walked from the cabin to the outside, followed the direction the sound came from, and chased after him, and saw that the search and rescue helicopter really appeared overhead, and Lisa was so excited that she kept waving. He called for help, but because the trees in the forest were too dense, the search and rescue personnel did not see Lisa's voice, and they actually forbade him from flying over his head and looking at the helicopter. Gradually disappearing, Lisa's hope of escaping was shattered again. There was no choice but to return to the airport, ready to stay where he was and look for another opportunity. But he didn't expect this at all. He had just come to the wreckage of the plane, but suddenly saw an extremely terrifying scene. It turned out that the wreckage of the calculation at this time was a tiger too much. The passengers' chopped corpses were killed, and she was extremely scared. But just as she involuntarily slowly retreated, she accidentally stepped on a dead branch under her feet. The tiger walked towards her step by step, and Lisa didn't dare to breathe under the atmosphere. But the helicopter that left before this arbitrary and tense confrontation flew again. When he came back, the tiger also laughed at this huge roar instantly, and then got into the same age on the side without looking back, although Lisa was lucky to escape. But he also realized it. It was no longer safe here, but her boyfriend had 4 positions left at this time, and Shaw had to find him first. Looking at the tattered plush doll in front of him, Lisa suddenly had an idea, thinking that between the stone method, he quickly took off the pin on a certain chest, then patted it and put it on the skirt, constantly rubbing it. And the steel needle had a certain magnetism. After sex, Lisa put it on a leaf on the water again. I stopped a car, and just as I was about to react, I slowly reacted, and finally, the strength really drove the leaves to point out the direction for it. After arriving in the direction, Lisa did not dare to delay for a moment. He first returned to the airport to find some equipment, and then came to the creek to fill it up, and once the river was watery, he drilled with a cane. Entering the woods, he limped and embarked on a journey to find a boyfriend. But the difficulties on the road were not at all what Lisa could imagine, facing this steep hillside one after another. Although Lisa had exhausted all her strength and the pain in her feet, she still let him roll down again if he was not careful. Along the way, difficulties and obstacles emerged one after another, and the grain sand still relied on strong perseverance to survive. But Zhang Laotian seemed to be deliberately embarrassing him, and it didn't take long for her to meet him again. The tiger in front looked at the fresh afternoon tea delivered to the door in front of him, and the tiger did not hesitate. Sao Lisa pounced on it, and Lisa quickly threw away her crutches and ran away. How could he run away with a dime of his injuries? Watching the tiger sand that was only 1 step away from him, hurriedly came to a place to release himself, and then closed his eyes. Jumping down, Lisa, who was lying in the stone crevice, fainted again. And fortunately, the tiger saw that the situation was wrong, and after wondering for a while, he finally left. In this way, Lisa successfully escaped again. He walked all the way to another hillside and was lucky to find a suitcase here, and Lisa opened the suitcase. The day after tomorrow, a lighter was dug out of it, and the woman's good luck finally came. And he first used the lighter to upgrade this sentence as a response point, and then found a stone, smashed open a bottle of can, and finally slept beautifully after drinking and eating. and waited until early the next morning, and Lisa, who was in high spirits, continued to embark on the journey, and she postponed it this time. Continuing yesterday's good luck, he actually found another airport from the edge of the cliff before he walked a few steps. And to Lisa's pleasure, these wrecks were still preserved. With a complete flying passenger cockpit, maybe there is a communication tool that can contact the outside world. Thinking of this, the young king ran down the hillside and then jumped in without hesitation. After a difficult 80 in the turbulent river, Lisa finally managed to reach the other side. But he was very disappointed that not only the communication equipment in the cabin had already been damaged, bad, and even the bullets in the flare gun are roughly unusable, so Lisa can only return to the forest and prepare to continue looking for her boyfriend. But because of the clothes on her body, the thing had already been caused by the river system, and Lisa Porcelain couldn't cope with the cold at all, so he could only desperately collect branches from the ground, ready to light a pile of bonfires for warmth. When he took out the lighter and prepared to live, he found that she had already been soaked by the river. No matter how hard she tried, she could never point to the desperate Lisa, who looked at the side. The plastic bag involuntarily had thoughts of suicide in his heart. But just as Lisa's consciousness was gradually blurring, he suddenly saw a familiar backpack appear above his head, which turned out to be the luggage bag that her boyfriend was carrying. With Lisa quickly used a wooden stick to peel it off. But after opening it, she found that it was all sketch versions of her boyfriend. Looking at the essence, Shang Nangyu drew a sketch for himself, and Xiang Lisa couldn't help but recall the bits and pieces of the two together. And these things in the backpack were given to him by her boyfriend when he was about to propose. This discovery not only rekindled Lisa's hope, but also made her more convinced that her boyfriend must be nearby. And sure enough, she braved the heavy rain and walked again for a while. Yu found her boyfriend in a mud puddle, and as soon as he saw the other party slumped on the ground motionless, Shah Alliance jumped into Nikon desperately, and he rushed to her boyfriend's side tightly. The lyrics were the other party's cold body, but it was constantly reminding Lisa that the man she loved was no longer desperate and helpless. Facing the sky behind the curtain, Seconds suddenly found a helicopter flying this way, looking at her long-dead boyfriend Lisa on the side, knowing that all this was the other party guiding her. And he knew that her boyfriend was. Hoping that he would live well, he gritted his teeth in terms of strength, and once again plucked up the courage. So he grabbed the number and ran out of the pit desperately. And then he took out the signal in his bag. The gun then prayed silently, then pulled the trigger to the sky. And sure enough, with the blessing of her boyfriend, the signal gun successfully fired the last bullet, and the search and rescue people in the distance were searched and rescued. The member also quickly arrived to save Lisa, and at the end of the movie, Lisa became the only survivor of the accident. And just as he was about to leave the forest, he seemed to see it again. The boyfriend waved his hand to himself, and the affectionate love between the two also became the source of motivation for Lisa to overcome all suffering. And what is even more unexpected is the movie. It turned out to be based on a real event. This air crash was the largest and most tragic crash in the former Soviet Union. And the prototype of Lisa in the movie was this air crash. When recalling the air crash 40 years ago, he would always mention his boyfriend's deep love for him. And he said that it was his boyfriend who was his anchor before he died. Only then can you overcome all kinds of difficulties and enjoy yourself. Although everything around you has changed over the years,